And now Father Jim's recording. So that also means that this will be available on Holy Faith's website at a later point. It also means that if you do not want to be recorded, I'd ask that you perhaps blank your screen, and then you won't be seen, and stay muted, and then you will not be, your voice will not be recorded. But otherwise, we'll assume that you'll want all this um, to be memorialized for people to refer to. Good. Well, thank you again for everyone for being here, and let's begin with offering some prayers. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, with whom do live the spirits of those who depart hence in the Lord, and with whom the souls of the faithful, after they are delivered from the burden of the flesh, are in joy and felicity, we give thee hearty thanks for the good examples of all those thy servants, and especially Father Richard, who having finished their course in faith, do now rest from their labors. And we beseech thee that we, with all those who are departed in the true faith of thy holy name, may have our perfect consummation in bliss, both in body and soul, in thy eternal and everlasting glory, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Remember thy servant, Father Richard, O Lord, according to the favor which thou bearest unto thy people, and grant that, increasing in knowledge and love of thee, he may go from strength to strength in the life of perfect service in thy heavenly kingdom, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Almighty God, Father of mercies and giver of all comfort, deal graciously, we pray thee, with all those who mourn, that casting every care on thee, they may know the consolation of thy love, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. All right. If you'd like to speak, simply raise your hand, and be patient with us as we scroll through to see if we can recognize hands as they are. I see Annette Molnar's hand raised, actually in the video. So Annette, if you'd like to unmute yourself and begin.
Hello, I am a deacon. I've served as deacon at St. Bede's when Father Murphy arrived, until I went to live in Massachusetts 16 years ago to be with my children. I just am so happy to have this chance to tell how much I appreciated Father Murphy's with me in my life. He was such a kind and gentle person. And we all loved his lively sense of humor.
Thank you. I see Alan Scarf's hand. If you'd care to unmute yourself and.
Yeah, I'm Alan Scarf and my wife Donna. And we were blessed to sort of live above the Murphys during seminary. That's how I got to know Richard. I'm going to call him Richard because when I was talking to Carol the other day, she called him Richard all the time, and I was calling him Dick, and so I'm going to call him Richard. And I haven't talked to Carol about all that, but that's what I'm going to do. I hear you talking and calling him Father Richard. Yeah, we were seminary buddies. They were not as blessed because they had to live underneath us, so they probably heard our backs and forths, and now 3 kids. And Jeremiah and Dominic were pretty well a similar age, and it's nice to see Jeremiah. I pinned you, Jeremiah, so I could get a picture of you with that lovely beard and everything. So we're catching up, unfortunately, at the same time as having to give thanks to God for Richard's life. Yeah, I don't think a day passed without us being together. There was some conversation, in one room or the other. I was mostly down in the Murphy's house, and the kids were at school together. And he he went on from glory to glory in the seminary. I mean, he was beloved by all of the, he ended up being on the front desk, and he dealt with all of the homeless that would wander in to the seminary lobby, and was pretty well known, I think, by all of them, and truly was within the seminary community, you know, whoever you have known him to be as Father Richard. I mean, he was just beloved, and he loved, and had an opening for everybody, an open heart for everybody as they flowed through that place. My memory of one memory from seminary, which is not a very, you know, it was one that he turned up at my doorstep one day. He said, I think I've had a bad beer, and that had gone off, you know, somehow, and felt like he'd been poisoned. And my response to, would I take him to the hospital? And my response was, I'll lose my parking spot. We were in New York at the time. I said, I'll lose my parking spot. Anyway, that was only a momentary lapse. And the next thing, you know, I did get him to where he needed to be. And then we went our different ways. I went to come back to California. He went to, I think he stayed an extra year on at seminary, actually. And then he went on to Boston, and we visited there during the World Cup, and got to enjoy North Boston, all the Brazilians at that point, and the Italians. I think the Italians were up in North Boston. Anyway, so that was that. And then the next thing I knew, he was inviting me to come, and I think I spoke at his installation at St. Bede's, and when he became rector there. And I remember visiting. I remember just seeing him in his office, and what struck me was Gandhi on his wall and Mother Teresa on his wall. These were the kind of saints, St. Francis. These were the people who inspired him, and that he was molded after in many ways. His own life reflected their lives in our modern times. And then we just, I think one more time, I thought we had a family visit in Santa Fe, and that's been it. So I just had to be present, wanted to be present today. It was a surprise for all of you of his death, and so we're so grateful for you holding this time. Under COVID, rules for funerals and so on are so limited. But to have this time for sharing. And so I'm jumping in first, just to sort of get it all out there. And I look forward to just hearing the wonderful unfolding of ministry that we were able to be part of from its beginning, as we listen to your testimonies. Now, love to you, Carol.
Thank you, Bishop. And the question in the chat was, which seminary? And it's the other seminary. No, it's General Seminary.
Yeah,
General Seminary in New York.
Donna's always telling me not to take things for granted, but you know, why not? There is the seminary, General Seminary, and in its heyday, I think it's a bit half its size right now, but in its heyday.
Thank you. And on the order of seeing hands, I'm going to call on Mother Madeline, and then Susan Odysseus, and then Nancy Franson, Carol's sister, would like to speak. So in that order, Mother Madeline.
First of all, I'd like to say blessings and good morning to you, Carol. I was worked with Father Murphy from the day he arrived at St. Bede's to the day of his retirement. It was always with great harmony and support and encouragement from him. I was a deacon when he first came, and priesthood during his time there at St. Bede's. Excuse me. He was the epitome of casting a wide net as a fisher of men. He's one of the few people I've ever known that really made no distinction between the homeless poor and the wealthy of position. He was a friend to all. And if he was your friend, he was your friend. You could count on that. And just quickly, I remember one season we were preparing for Holy Week. So it was spring and the evenings were still quite chilly and it had been a very long day. And Richard was needing to get home. He needed to eat. As you know, he was diabetic. And just as we were about to lock up the church, I think we'd actually already set the alarm. Someone came to the door looking for help. Well, to my shame, my first instinct was, oh, let's send him to the shelter. But Richard's instinct was to open up the church and bring him in and speak with him. So we managed to get some hot water together and some saltine crackers. And Richard sat with him, spoke with him, listened to him. And it was getting later and later, and I was getting more and more antsy, thinking I needed to get home. And Richard was just relaxed and friendly and listening to this person. And so I managed to say to him quietly, maybe we should give him some money for the bus so he can go to the shelter. Oh no, that wasn't good enough. When we were finished with the tea and the crackers, Richard put him in his own car and drove him to the shelter. It was so typical of him to not just give the token help, but to give it all: friendship, respect, genuine caring for this individual who he'd never met before. And the other side of Richard was he besides his great humor, he didn't stand on ceremony many times. And I always get tickled when I remember he knew I was able to notarize things for him. I was a notary. And he had waited a little bit late to renew his Irish passport. And so he called me and we met in the parking lot of Holy Faith. I'd brought my stamp with me and I notarized his documents for him. And he was so delighted and he just jumped in his car and zoomed off to get those documents in the nick of time. Richard he had a sermon in his pocket all the time. He told me a little story about one time when his bishop had teased him as they were preparing, investing for a service. And his bishop said to him, I'm assuming that you will preach today, Richard. I would like to hear you preach. And of course, he was horrified because he had no intention of preaching that day, assuming that his bishop would preach. And I thought it was a very funny story. And actually, his bishop did preach. So I waited a few weeks thinking that I was going to pull a little joke on Richard. And I said to him, when it was my turn to preach, I'm so glad you're preaching today, Father Richard, since I don't have a sermon. And he did. I was the one that had the joke played on me. So as we processed in, he had his sermon ready because, as he told me, you always have your sermon ready. Richard himself was a sermon. He was a joyful, generous person and a wonderful priest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mother Madeline. Susan Odysseus, good to see you from
Thank you.
Colorado.
Yes, thank you, and good morning from Colorado. I just got out of my Zoom church to attend this memorial for Richard. When I first moved from Christ Church in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I had my initial conversation with Father Richard, I was a goner once he found out that I had done a lot of work with the homeless on the streets of Manhattan through the Midnight Run. The rest became history, and we established with many churches the interfaith shelter for the homeless. And it was a wonderful experience to have people who would come to the shelter and learned that I was with St. Bede's. He said, "Oh, you're the ones that have got that wonderful Father Murphy." So it was a great sort of affirmation of what we were already finding. And so he helped us, he encouraged me, and I became the founding chairman, to be followed by the esteemed Kenneth Seaman. In so many ways, our parishioners wrote letters to the city councilors to get the support that we needed, and we hosted, we did everything that we could, and it was wonderful. Then when Richard decided to retire, and he went over to Holy Faith, my favorite service was going to Taizé. And I got to tell you, his sermons there were as good as he ever gave anywhere. And it was also a chance to see Carol and hug and just reconnect as time went by. And now that I'm up in Colorado, I still think fondly of my experience at St. Bede's and of course at Holy Faith. And I've been very busy in many ways that I won't go into, except to mention spending 30 days on the island of Lesbos helping refugees. But I always remember how Richard encouraged us to do God's work. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We've had some, before I call on Nancy Franson, we've had some comments in the chat, and especially for people who are on the telephone who can't see chat. Just want you to know that the GARs have said, we're all looking for examples. Richard Murphy was a wonderful, gracious example of living a life that reflects the marvels of the divine. Father Richard was so gentle with children. He once sat on the floor at the altar after a service meeting with the littlest ones and explained Holy Thursday. Wonderful characteristics, and so representative of Father Richard. Nancy, I saw you're in the chat, and then Patricia Cahalan, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. You will be on deck, and then Patty Vaughn after Patricia. So Nancy.
Thank you, Bishop. I'm Nancy.
Yet, or at all.
Oh, okay. Nancy Franson here. I'm Carol's oldest sister by 18 months. I reside in Concord, New Hampshire. In 1998, I wrote a family memories book based on my maternal grandparents. I interviewed Carol and Dick's son, Jeremiah, my one and only nephew, via phone for my book. I'd like to share a couple notes with you from that interview. I asked Jeremiah, "What do your parents do in their spare time?" "Oh, they like to talk, and they talk a lot." "My mom likes to give tours. My dad likes to go hiking. So does my mother. My dad likes to see movies. My mom likes to go for walks. My mom is very interested in the food she eats and the nutritional aspect. My dad likes to read. He's a scholar." Next question is, do you have a happy memory to share? I remember once when I lived on Cape Cod. I must have been 11 or 12. My parents and I bought a kite on a cloudy day, and we went to the beach to fly it. We took pictures, and we ran around the beach with a kite. It was very fun. My parents had a fun time. So did I. I love my parents. Words of wisdom. Take good care of yourself because others can see that in you. Be polite. Say excuse me when you interrupt somebody. Go to church every Sunday. Never forget to laugh. And always be the first to laugh. So in closing, my brother-in-law, Richard, I always called him Dick, always wrote his family Christmas letter. I will miss his informative news and his wit that was in that letter for the past year, every year, and his encouraging words for the new year. This was written at the close of his letter in 2018. Richard shared Psalms 143, verse 8. Let me hear of your loving kindness in the morning, for I put my trust in you. Show me the road I must walk, for I lift up my soul to you. I was always very proud of Richard and of course the love of his family. And I'm so sorry that I'm so far away and I can't be close to my sister or my nephew Jeremiah. But they're in my heart and the memories are in my heart forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And I assume that you grew up in Springfield, Vermont with
Yes.
everybody
Yeah.
else. So, you know, that's my hometown too. And so that's probably why you wanted to elevate me to the episcopate. So thank you for that. We Springfielders and Vermonters have to stick together.
Oh, yes. And remember, it was North Springfield we were in.
Not Springfield, North. Yeah.
But of course, it went to Springfield High and all that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Patricia Cahalan, I hope I'm pronouncing that.
Cahalan.
Cahalan, sorry.
Close enough, Father. Thank you.
Actually, John was the one who wanted to talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was my privilege and my blessing to know Dick for over 70 years. I met him the first day in kindergarten, and we grew up together. He was like a second brother to me, and part of the family. And so I guess that's no surprise. If you know Dick, Dick is everybody's best friend. That's just the way he was. I wouldn't speak to him for a couple of years. I could call him on the phone and we would be instantly transported back to being 8 or 15 or 20 years old. It was amazing that we could just pick up like that. When I was growing up with Dick, I would have to say that he was not a scholar. And he would admit that. And yet Dick is the one of our group who ended up with a PhD. So there you have it. And he was actually a scholar. He just didn't know it at the time. His mother would be proud of him today. Where else do I say? As we got older, I got to know Dick a little bit better or differently through social media and following him on places like Facebook. And I would say that through that, I think I saw Dick leading people who followed him to be better Christians and to be closer to Christ, which is pretty amazing. I can't put 70 years of great memories into a minute of speaking. It's just not possible. So I'll give you some broad strokes. I think everybody knew his sense of humor, and sometimes it turned to mischief. And so, yes, Dick and I got into mischief as we grew up. I'm not going to tell any tales today. We want to protect the innocent, so we'll go there. But I remember his sense of humor, his unconditional friendship, his reverence for God, and his irreverence toward modern day Pharisees and Philistines. It was a life well lived, and today I'm sad that Dick is gone, but it's not sadness for Dick, it's sadness for me. Dick lived a full life, a good life, and I'm sure he's with the Lord that he loves so much. Thank you.
And before we sign off, I've known Dick since I was 12. Dick was in our wedding. He godfather to our oldest child. And one of my favorite pictures is a picture of Dick holding our firstborn right after she was born. And it's just a wonderful memory.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Dick.
So, one of my favorite memories of Dick is shortly after Pat and I were married, we visited Dick at his home in New Haven, and we told him that we were expecting our first. And it was a look of unconditional joy for us. And then we asked him to be the godfather, and he was just blown away. It was a perfect afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for those memories, John and Patricia. Patty Vaughn is next, and then I see Janet, and then Charles. You've got your hands up, so we'll go in that order. Patty Vaughn, please. You'll have to unmute yourself first. Patty, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Thank
Okay.
you.
First, I want to express my condolences to Carol and your family. Jim and I are parishioners here at Holy Faith in Santa Fe, and we were blessed to have Father Murphy cross paths with our lives. Father Murphy to me just represented the embodiment of Christ on earth. Last year, my sister was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And on the Sunday after that diagnosis, I ran into Father Murphy in Palin Hall, and I told him of the situation. And he didn't waste a minute. He took my hand and he offered a prayer for my sister and for me in my hearing, which was so important to me. It just meant the world, and it gave me strength for what was to come. And my sister ultimately died in August. But Father Murphy sent me several notes during that time that were so encouraging. And I feel so blessed. But I'm sad that I had so many questions that I wanted to talk to Father Murphy about. And now I won't get to. But I just wanted you to know how much he meant to me and to my family. And we're just so grateful to have known him.
Thank you, Patty. Janet, I saw your hand next, and then Charles.
Yeah, coming from Holy Faith, I met a man that walked in the door and he always had a smile on his face. And he absolutely loved children. And he loved his grandchildren more than anything in the world, because every time you asked him about him, he would whip out the pictures, let me see what was going on. And he just had such a joyous presence about him. He would always come into the acolyte room before and after services and thank everybody for serving with him and serving at the altar, which was something, that meant a lot to all of us. His sermons, everybody knows how wonderful they were. Never saw him read a note. I mean, and I could hear him. I've heard him sometimes 3 times, and it was almost verbatim. I don't know how, but it was. And then I remember when Harvey and I went to Ireland, our driver couldn't find Episcopal churches. We were trying to find as many as we could to go to. And I wrote to him, and he sent us on a path, because we went around the island, and he sent us on a path that we got to enjoy a lot of Anglican churches. So I think of him as a father, a grandfather, a friend, just a wonderful, lovely person. And Carol, you were lucky to be married to such a great man, and I know you miss him.
Thank you, Janet. Charles Chambers, and then Chuck Miller.
Thank you. I want to express our condolences to Carol as well. Penny, my wife, who can't be here today because she's serving at Holy Family today, but for the last 3.5 years, Father Richard was her spiritual advisor. And I know that she would love to be here and express her feelings for those 3.5 years with him that she feels were incredibly important in her discernment and in her formation. And I know that they spoke every 2 or 3 weeks for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and it never seemed like it seemed like 10 minutes to her. She cherishes those memories, and he will always be a part of her ministry as she goes forth in the process for ordination. I just wanted to express that, and I know I'm glad this is being recorded so she can hear it. But she was devastated at the loss, but she devastated for herself and for us, not for Father Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Chuck Miller, and then Stephen Hecht, and then Owen Kunkel.
Good morning, all, and hello, particularly to my old pals at Holy Faith, who I haven't seen in some years. I had the great privilege of meeting and getting to know Dick before I moved to Southern California when he arrived at Holy Faith, and we had a number of lunches, and just instantly liked him, as I'm sure any and all else did. And as an example of his humor, something I wanted to share, which I'll never forget, is when he alluded to a time when he was fresh out of seminary, and I guess Carol was listening to one of his sermons, and afterwards she said, "Dick, it's time to get off the steeple and down with the people." And I never forgot that. I thought it was just brilliant. And believe me, there have been any number of occasions since then when I wish that I might have been able to share that sentiment with a few people in the pulpit, but fortunately I refrained. And finally, I would just like to say, share rather the following, which was from a headstone in Ireland, and I think it's pretty appropriate. Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, and it's good to see you back with your Holy Faith family again. Glad you're here. Stephen Hecht, and then Owen.
Hi, everyone. I just want to mention something I don't think it's been mentioned yet. I served with others a number of times doing noonday services and noonday mass, and we'd have our little chats before and after. And I just want to emphasize how connected he was with his roots in Eastern Massachusetts. Of course, I'm from Boston as well, so maybe that's why. But we had a conversation where he didn't allude his childhood or his early adulthood or his religious and cultural background in Massachusetts, and he was always so connected to that part of him, that part of his evolution. So, and he brought that here, and it was very rich to me because it's a very strong cultural engagement in the past. And a lot of us leave that behind when we move else, but he never lied. He always kept that as part of himself. So I think that was a big part of who he was. And my condolences also to Carol.
Thank you, Stephen. Deacon Owen, and then Canon Rainey.
Hello, all, and Carol, Gail, and I both send our love to you and to Jeremiah and his family. I want to remember something about Father Richard's sense of humor. Outside his door, at the office there at St. Bede's, there was a sign that said, "Waking up in the morning and saying, 'Oh God,' doesn't constitute going to church." And I always remembered that. I have been a deacon at St. Bede's since 1985, so I was there and still am, so was there during the whole time that Richard was at St. Bede's, and it was a wonderful time for me. As many of you have said, he was such a good friend and an encouragement to those of us who served with him. I remember, well, we as deacons would give sermons, and I had been giving sermons, for 20 plus years, and it was always a struggle for me. I always would read the lessons ahead of time, in the early part of the week. I'd think about it all week, but I would never get down to writing it until Saturday. And it was I would be up often to the wee hours of the morning, getting it all ready. And then I'd struggle into church for both services to give the sermon. And I remember one time, it was the Sunday after Christmas, and I was scheduled to preach. And I just could not come up with anything. I was just stuck. And I got to a point early in the evening where I knew that I was just out and I could not preach. And so I was basically in a panic mode. And I called Richard and I said, Richard, I just can't preach tomorrow. And I remember he was so open. He just said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll preach. I can preach. So just don't worry about it. And it was such a relief. That's the way he was. I also have one other memory of a story that he told during a sermon. And I want to tell that story because I want anybody else who remembers him telling that story, either during that sermon or any other time, to help me with the ending, because my memory stops at a certain point on that story, and it's not a place that I want to stop. Here's the story. So I think it was soon after his ordination, and he was serving in the Boston area as an assisting priest. And apparently he was taking a course up at Harvard and had to travel on public transport to get there. And he came up out of the subway there at Harvard Square. And he was walking to his course late, and he was in a hurry, and there was a homeless person there, accosting people or asking help from people. And Father Murphy was newly ordained, assisting priest, didn't have much money. He was also late for his class, so he was kind of scuttling off to the side, hoping that the man wouldn't see him, wouldn't catch his eye. Father Murphy was not looking at him. And he thought he had just about gotten past without having to do anything when the man said, I don't want your money, Father. I just want your prayer.
I remember that sermon.
I don't remember any more to the story. I want Father Richard to say, so I was stopped dead in my tracks, and I turned around and I went and prayed with him. But I don't remember that. I don't know whether he was stopped dead in his tracks or if he just scuttled on to class. So
No, you're right, Owen. He did stop. And he told that in the sermon, that the man's voice so arrested him, and he felt quite shamed. And he went back and he did pray with him on the street, as you know that Father Richard often did. He would pray with you anywhere. But in his sermon, he did tell that he stopped, he spoke to the man and he prayed with him. That was the end of the story.
Well,
But he
good. I'm
did pray
glad
with
to
him.
have that ending because I didn't have it in my memory.
I remember that sermon very well and that story. Yeah.
Well, God bless Father Richard.
Indeed. Thank you, Deacon Owen. Canon Rainey and then Deborah.
You know, I was a lay person when I met Richard. I was on the vestry at St. Bede's, and we had just finished a reconciliation with Bishop Kelshaw under the leadership of Bob Lawrence, who was senior warden at St. Bede's at that time. And part of the reason that the vestry decided on Father Richard was his ministry of reconciliation. You know, he told us of the work he had done in Northern Ireland, and while he was at St. Bede's, he worked with, had made a trip and worked with some reconciliation work in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And he was always pressing for folks to reconcile. I mean, he was able to complete the reconciliation with Bishop Kelshaw and bring St. Bede's out of the darkness of the conflict we were in at that time, and went on to work and become president of the standing committee and helped guided the diocese through some really rough times that were going on. And for myself personally, I served as his second senior warden and was able to get him some of the help he needed to start building, you know, ministries at St. Bede's. And later on, he actually was the priest who got me to enter the ordination process. And you know, when Bishop Vaughn appointed me a canon, Richard took great pride in that, and I really appreciated all the work he had given to me to bring me to where I am in my life. So he was, you know, a strong spiritual leader, and his ministry of reconciliation was just unsurpassed.
Thank you, Canon Rainey. Deborah, you're next, and then Jeremiah, and then Vivian, Carol's sister, and then Mother Pam Graham. Deborah, you have
Thank you very much. Carol and Jeremiah, I'm so sorry for your loss. And thank you to the church for sponsoring the memorial today. I'm calling in from Northern Virginia, and it really means a lot to me to be able to hear these wonderful memories of Father Richard. I hope you feel better. Oh, that's my son. I am John and Patty's oldest, so I'm that goddaughter that they were talking about earlier. So I've had the privilege of knowing Richard for 51 years. And like others, I can tell you that years would go by in which I would not speak with him. And then every once in a while, there would be an email or a phone call or a letter. And he was so easy to speak with. And so easy to listen to. You know, I always felt like I could see the spark of the divine in him, and it sparked it in other people. And even though we both left Catholicism and he found his devotion in the seminary, and I am a devoted Jew now, we always had so many things to talk about that brought us to see the world in similar ways. We're both devoted to social justice efforts, and we would talk about, I remember the last time I saw him was in Santa Fe, and I was visiting for work, and we talked about the issues with Native American communities in the Southwest that I had also been involved with years before, the Hispanic community there. racism in our time and how to overcome it. And he leaves this lasting legacy that is that burns bright. His memory is really a blessing. So thanks so much for having this today.
Thank you, Deborah. Jeremiah, you're next, and then Vivian, and then Mother Pam, and then Marcia.
I just want to say thank you. It's so beautiful hearing all these stories. I love touching on my dad's commitment to being a friend to the friendless, and just his love of forgiveness and hearing everybody's story and wanting to participate whenever he could. And while he loved to talk, he just loved to listen too. One story that comes to mind is when I was getting my driver's license in Massachusetts. The test is administered by the state police, and we drove out to Cape Cod from Quincy, Mass, to because it was the earliest test I could get. My dad sat in the back seat while the state trooper sat next to me. And at the end of the test, the state trooper was shocked at what a bad driver I was, and proceeded to tell me that I rolled through every stop sign that I came to. And then she turned to my dad, who was wearing his clerical collar, and said, "Did you see him stop at a single stop sign?" And my dad looked from side to side and said, "Yes, he stopped at every single one." And it's just the kind of support my dad always gave me. I'm going to miss talking to him and getting his advice. And I want to share some advice he gave me that people might not have heard from him. One piece was, if you ever rob a bank, to bury the money in the ground, because when you get out of jail, you can just dig it up and nobody can take it away from you. Another piece of advice was, don't hire a hitman to rob a bank. And he had some good ones. He just always taught me to, be a good person. And I love hearing these stories. Thank you, son. This is his granddaughter, Walden. Walden, did you have anything you wanted to share?
I have a memory, and the memory is when my Pow Pow read to my little brother Desmond.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that memory. Thanks again, and I'll hit the mute button.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Thank you, Walden. I wonder if his advice came from his years as a parole officer about who to hire to rob a bank and all. Maybe he's speaking with, because he had wonderful stories about his years as a parole officer as well, and he saw just about everything under the sun. I think between being a parole officer and being a priest, he covered the gamut. Vivian, would you like to say something?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Vivian. I'm Carol's baby sister. Greetings from New Jersey today. And I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so much to Holy Faith for having this event. I just wanted to share a few reflections. I remember Father Richard Murphy as a lover of books, lifelong learning, and advanced studies. I remember his ability to have long, meaningful conversations about whatever was on someone's mind, always willing to listen and make connections with others. I remember his love of travel, especially his visits to Oxford University in England and Ireland, the land of his relatives who are still living there. I remember his love of the ocean air and walking along the beach with his true love, Carol. I remember his unconditional love and ability to get along with an odd collection of in-laws, including me. I remember how proud he's been over the years to see his talented and caring son, Jeremiah, grow in so many ways, providing encouragement all along the way. I remember the pure delight he has experienced as a grandfather who truly adores Walden and Desmond. He will always be known to them as Pow Pow, one of the first names they both learned to speak. I remember great laughter with him in his keen sense of humor. I remember his love for God and the church. He set an example to me in showing one's faith in practical ways and building a sense of community among us all, with no one left behind. Most of all, his marriage with Carol, more than 46 years strong, has been a sight to behold. Here's one recent example. In early November, before leaving the house for same-day surgical procedure, they danced around the breakfast table to the music of Jimmy Durante, perhaps to the tune of "You Gotta Start Off Each Day with a Song," kicking up their heels, including plenty of joyful spinning and twirling with boogie-woogie footwork. That's the kind of marriage they built together. I give thanks for my brother-in-law, Richard Murphy.
Thank you, Vivian. And good to see you after all those years ago in high school. Mother Pam, I think you're next, and then Marcia.
I'm Pam Graham, Mother Pam Graham, and I served at Holy Faith the last 2 years before my retirement and got to know Father Richard and Carol. And Carol, I'm so sorry for yours and Jeremiah and the whole families and all of our loss. It's a true loss. Father Richard and I would sit in the library and talk about being raised in Catholic school. And the stories that we shared were really fun. And I loved his wit, his humor, his whole holy self. He was the absolute example of walking the walk, talking the talk, being the hands, the feet, and the voice of Jesus on earth. And it was truly a privilege to know him and you, Carol. So let us remember him with laughter and love, because that's what he exudes by his very presence.
Thank you, Mother Pam. Marcia, you're next, and then Judith Seltzer.
Thank you. First, Carol, I want to offer my sincerest condolences. Father Richard was just a pure joy, an absolute joy to know, and a privilege to know. I've only known him for a short time and part of the time because we're not in Santa Fe year round. But when we arrived in Santa Fe and I began looking for an Episcopal church, I came to St. Bede's. I immediately felt so welcomed and I looked no further. Father Murphy was kind enough to come to our home to bless it, which my mom, who was visiting, appreciated very much. And then a few years later, another friend facilitated the emplacement of a retablo in our home. Father Murphy returned to bless it as well. And then Father Murphy and Carol have been to our home for lunch just because we just so enjoyed being with him and talking to him and learning from him. It's ironic to me that he passed away on Epiphany. One of my great pleasures when I'm in Santa Fe is to try to have a gathering to celebrate Epiphany. And We had that great privilege last year. Father Murphy was there. That's my memory. I feel a bit of an interloper. So many of you have known him for a much longer period of time and a greater level of friendship and companionship. But in my relatively short time around him, I've been deeply affected in a very, very positive way. He was an amazing person. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Judith Seltzer is next, and then Michelle Franson Conroy.
So Carol and Jeremiah, my heart goes out to you as well. And similarly with our daughter, Catherine. She grew up during the period in which Father Murphy was the rector. So he played an important role in her life. She was an acolyte and a crucifer, and I know that meant a lot to her. One curious thing, on the day that we learned about Father Murphy's passing, I called to tell her that what had happened. And she said, "Mother, you won't believe this, but I woke up this morning and said, if I ever get married, I want Father Murphy to officiate in my wedding." And I mean, I was just struck. It was just a wonderful, wonderful thing for her to want. So who knows? She may never get married, so then we don't have to worry about anybody officiating in her wedding. And I have two other quick stories. One is he came to St. Bede's fundraising dinner at Pepper's with Carol and Jeremiah and his grandchildren. And, you know, he was just always wonderful and friendly and walked around the room and said hello to everybody. And then my final memory is Carol and Father Murphy attended a results dinner, a fundraising dinner every year for several years. There wasn't one this year because of COVID. And so it was great because if I hadn't seen them during the year, I got to see them. But they were big supporters of Results, which is an advocacy group for many causes, including an end to hunger. So Carol, I hope if Results ever comes live again, that you will continue to join us. And thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Michelle, you're next.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Is there feedback?
No, it's not bad.
Okay, because my internet is unstable, so I had to call. So I'm hearing feedback, but I just wanted to say thank you for having this service. This is great for everybody to be able to share. I just wanted to say that I wish I could be there in person to hug my family members, like a really big, long bear hug. I love them so much and my heart goes out to them. And I'm praying for them every day. And I just wanted to share a story. I went to go visit Carol, Dick, and Jeremiah in New York City. I was probably about maybe 18, 19, 20. And I think I was visiting for like a week. And it was during Christmas time. And they were gonna have, New Year's Eve and everything. And at Times Square, the ball dropping and everything, I thought, well, that would be really great to see, how, am I ever gonna be able to do this again? And Jeremiah was really little then, so Carol stayed home with him, but my Uncle Dick said he would take me. So that was like huge for me to be able to go do that. And I'm sure that probably wasn't how he wanted to spend New Year's Eve, but he and I can't remember the other person's name, but a friend of his went with his daughter. And so all four of us went together and went to Times Square. And that was when you could be all packed in together, like thousands and thousands of people. And it was so amazing to be able to go there and see that. And that was really very unselfish and wonderful for him to do, to take me there. So I'll never forget that, being able to do that. And I just remember so many Thanksgivings and Christmases together with him. Carol and Dick got married when I was about 9. So I've known him for a pretty long time. I'm 55 now. And it's a great loss. And I can see how much everybody admired him and loved him, and what a just really wonderful person he was. And the sense of humor, the infectious laugh, I mean, I'll never forget. So thank you for having this again, and much love to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Aseneth Kepler has shared a document in the chat room. I've not been able to open it. Aseneth, can you at least tell us what it is? And then I'm afraid if I open it, I'm going to lose everything. So all the Zoom. So I don't want to do that. But Aseneth, can you tell us what you've sent us?
Yes, it's from an email I had with Father Murphy back in 2019. And there were 3 books that he recommended on the issue of reconciliation and forgiveness, which I think is very timely right now. What I'll do, since it can't be opened by you all, is I'll just type the names of those books into the chat box that he recommended. And I find it very timely in the area we're living in. And he was a very good example of how to live a life of forgiveness and reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Aseneth. Are there other people who'd like to speak? I don't see any hands. And I failed to mention that if you're on the telephone and you're muted right now, you can press, I think it's *6 or *8, and that would unmute you, and then you'd be able to speak as well. But it wasn't a last call by any means, but I do see that Father Jim would like to say something, and also Susan, and then Van, and then Lydia. Father Jim.
I would just like to say a couple of things. One, among the things I will miss most of all about Father Richard was just being with him in the vesting room before or after a service. His gentleness, his sweetness, and we'd sit and discuss, whatever. He'd ask how things are going with me and my wife Andy, and I'd ask him about things going with he and his beloved Carol and the grandchildren, and I'm also going to miss, believe it or not, discussions of 1960s NBA basketball, and even talk about the Celtics and the Lakers. I grew up in LA. We know he grew up in New England, and so the Celtics had much the better of it. In fact, they had all the better of it, but nonetheless, I enjoyed discussing old-time basketball with him. And I just want to say also that, it was an honor to share a sanctuary with him, an honor to share an altar with him. And I will miss that, greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Jim. Susan, and then Van, and then Lydia, then Jen, and then Steve Sipple. Susan, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. I just want to say that I was so sad to hear of Father Murphy's passing. It just came way too soon. I was always so happy when I became aware that he would be preaching, because it was always so delightful and meaningful. And there's a story that he told, which I heard more than once, which I remember imperfectly. And I'm wondering if there's anyone, perhaps Madeline, who might be able to tell us this story. it takes place in an emergency room. And I think that Father Murphy is very new to the priesthood. Could anyone tell me that story? And if so, I just want to say I'm sending my love to his family. I can only imagine the blessing it must have been to those of you who live with him and also those of you who served with him in the churches. Thank you so much for doing this.
Susan, I think I can start the story. As I remember it, it was when he was doing his clinical pastoral education as part of his seminary training in New York. And I believe he was at Bellevue Hospital where he did his work. And it was like a Saturday night, and he might have had duty in the emergency room. And of course, a Saturday night emergency room in New York City was, complete bedlam. And there was, as I remember it, either a knifing or a shooting a few blocks from the hospital. And it was as I remember, a gang member who had got shot or knifed and was brought into the emergency room. And as the seminarian on duty, his pager rang, and he, showed up at the emergency room and was able to saw the gang member who had been either shot or knifed, and I remember his saying that the doctors sort of looked at this, new seminarian, thrown in the middle of it, but they sort of indicated that he wasn't going to make it, and the gang member sort of looked at Father Richard before he was ordained, but said, "But Father, am I still able to go to heaven?" And Father Richard prayed with him and said, "Yeah." That's sort of how I remember it.
Oh,
Others might remember it
thank you.
a bit better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Van, I think you're next, and then Lydia and Jan and Steve and Carol.
Well, I knew Father Murphy during my time at Holy Faith for the last number of years, and served with him on the noontime Wednesday services, sometimes Thursdays. And we had many, many conversations. And his passion for social justice sort of matched mine. And so he would read things, and then the following week he would come running up to me and hand me sheaves of papers on the subject we were discussing the Wednesday before. I also serve on the board of the shelter, and he was always the first person there whenever Holy Faith had their weekly feeding, and he was always the first person there, and he would do absolutely anything. And I can remember last February, when was the last time that anybody was open to do anything, and we had our week at the shelter. Holy Faith did, and he showed up, and it was snowing, and must have been 8 inches of snow, and I was sure nobody would show up. Well, there he was. And so it was he and I I went early because I was afraid nobody else would, the snow was terrible. Anyway, there he was, and he said, "What can I do?" And I said, "Well, there's you and I, Father, so do you mind cutting the bread?" So he cut, several hundred pieces of bread for me. And then later on, people did show up, but it just showed that he he saw no distinction with people. He was very unusual in that sense. And he actually saw the people in a way that I had rarely seen people deal with people that had the disabilities that many of our people had. And he had such a joy for living. Anyway, I will certainly miss him. And I serve as an acolyte sometimes, and what I remember distinctly were the smiles whenever Father Murphy was going to preach. You would look out and people would be smiling from ear to ear before he even started talking. So it was always a joy when he preached a sermon. And most people just, aren't born with the sort of joy of living or the skill that he had. And he was truly a remarkable individual. And I am so sorry that we're not going to have him back at the altar. It was always wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Van. And thank you also, Asina, for putting those book recommendations of Father Richard on reconciliation and forgiveness in the chat, so that there's one by Desmond Tutu. For those who are on the phone, there's one by Desmond Tutu, No Future Without Forgiveness. One by Donald Crable, Amish Grace, about the shooting of the Amish children in Pennsylvania, and Miroslav Wolf's Exclusion and Embrace, which is about the Balkan conflict, written by a Croat about the Balkan conflict. Thank you very much, Asina, for sharing those. Lydia, you're up next.
Thank you for this opportunity. I want to first give my condolences to Carol and Jeremiah and family, and send my love. I'm a member of St. Bede's and knew Richard for his entire ministry there, time of ministry. And he was also a mentor to me. He was my boss for a while when I served as a Christian education person for a few years. And I consider him a very dear friend. But what I want to share is my last real visit with him, when my brother and my daughter called him when my husband was dying last year on January 4th. And it was a very last minute call, because I don't think we really knew that he was going to be leaving us so soon. And Richard came and gave my husband last rites, and it was an incredible thing for him to do and to be with us. And I will never forget that, and just never forget his love and kindness, his devotion to social justice. And I just thank God that he was with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Jan, and then Steve, and then Carol, and then Valentina and Ethan.
Can you hear me? No.
Yes, thank you, Jan. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I came to Santa Fe from Washington, D.C. in 2000. I went to Holy Faith first because I had been an usher at St. John's in Lafayette Square in Washington for many years, and that was kind of my style of a service. Well, no one spoke to me, and I went 2 or 3 times and no one spoke to me. So I then went to St. Bede's, and the first time I went, Dick Murphy came up and talked to me and said, "Are you a visitor?" And we just connected. And so I joined St. Bede's. And I also was not working then, and I asked him what charitable organization could use my time because I wanted to volunteer. And he suggested Esperanza. And I went to Esperanza as a volunteer, and I ended up being on the executive committee. And I think we did some good work. But when Father Murphy left St. Bede's, I left. And I went to Holy Faith. And by that time, Holy Faith was a different church than it had been in 2000. And I have been a member ever since. He counseled me about the changes from Washington, D.C. and the power structure to living in Santa Fe many times. He and Carol and I became friends. He actually married my brother when he remarried, and we had the reception here at my house. I thought he was extraordinary in every way, and I will miss him greatly. I give my sincere sympathy to Carol and the rest of the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Steve Sipple.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Pam and I extend our condolences to you, Carol and Jeremiah. And hi, Carrie and Walden. But Richard was really special for us. I remember one of the first times it was at the wedding there in California. And he was really impressing me. And of course, the wedding was special, and we have so many neat pictures. And it was fun also to hear so many nice comments from everybody. Some of the words that I would definitely use, words like respect. He gave me such a wonderful feeling, and I respect him. And relaxing is another word that came to me as I grew to know Dick and Carol. There's so many neat things about him that, well, I'll let Pam continue on here.
Pastor Richard was not only a pastor, he was a compassionate individual. People would just talk to him, and you could just tell that they were feeling gratitude. They were feeling and having the opportunity to talk to somebody who really cared. He gave me a spiritual growth. His compassion was something that I needed many times. There were times where I was with him where I wanted to just pull him to the side and let him know the things that I was really dealing with. At the same time, I also realized that his faith, his love, and his compassion just went inside of me. And in doing that, it helped me to realize that an individual may not physically be with us, but that person is within us. And I think it's important, especially in the issues that we're dealing with now, to remember those people who became a leadership for our own faith, a leadership for knowing that there are so many wonderful people that are in this world that are going to help us get through difficult times. Dick was somebody I could laugh with. Dick was somebody that I could have a lot of fun with. He was my blessing. He was my companion. And most of all, he is now an angel in heaven.
Thank you, Pam and Steve. Appreciate that. Carol, you're up next, and then Valentina and Ethan, and then Pastor Ben. Carol, you'll have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you yet. You can usually, if you drag the cursor over your own little screen box, you'll see something should come up that says mute or unmute, and you should be able to click on that. There you go.
Okay, here I am. Here I am. First of all, I just want to thank you so much for all the love and the support that I feel today and that I have been feeling from everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Also, I just wanted to speak with you a bit, Father Robin. The story that you said about the hospital, you've got the spirit of it right on. But actually the words were that the patient was lying there and the doctors kind of shoved Richard in to take care of the situation. And the patient just grabbed a hold of Richard's hand and said, "Does Jesus love me?" And Richard said, "Yes, Jesus loves me. It loves you. Yes, Jesus loves you." So I just wanted to let you know that that I've heard the story many, many times because it's been very touching, and it's been very touching for other people have given it back to me. So thank you very much for recalling it. And also, I just wanted you to know that when during the last days of Richard being home, he would have tremors just about every afternoon. And he could feel the tremors coming on. He'd get chills, and then when he started the chills, we would just hop in bed, and he would say, "Just hug me real tight," and I would hug him, and then we would talk, and then he would uncontrollably shake, and I would hang on to him, hugging him as tight as I could, and then we talked about, well, let's go to a special place. Let's go, in your mind, let's just go to a special place, and this will take its course. And so we went to Ireland one time, and we walked the streets of Ireland with around his cousin's house. And Anne Murphy, Rich's sister, knows exactly where I'm talking about. And we would also another time take a walk on the ocean, and he really enjoyed and became inspired by the ocean. And on the very last day when he had the tremor, I said, "Honey, where do you want to go today?" And he said, "Well, I want to go," he said, "I'm already there. I'm at the Society of St. John's Monastery in Harvard Square, near Harvard Square. And I'm there, and it's very peaceful." And then the trauma, after it took its course, that was that. So I just wanted to say that. And thank you so much for everybody and all of your sentiments and all of your memories. And I really appreciate people from near and far. And I'm surprised, Bishop Allen, for taking time out of your schedule, and for everybody else taking time as well. And God bless you all. And thank you so much for your support and prayers for our whole family. And we need them. We need them. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, our prayers definitely continue for you and your whole family, and for the repose of Father Richard's soul.
Thank you.
Valentina and Ethan, you're next. And then Pastor Ben.
Hi, Holy Faith family. Dear Carol, our condolences to you and your family. We just wanted to say that we are praying for you, that we will miss Father Murphy, and that he was one of the first ones who welcomed us very warmly at Holy Faith when Ethan was 2. He was a little guy, and we just happened to be new to the church. We were coming from Silver City, and somebody at Good Shepherd in Silver City said, well, you should go to St. Bede's. When you move to Santa Fe, Father Murphy's there. And for some reason, we went around, went to Holy Faith, we went to, I think, Holy Trinity and St. Bede's. And Ethan was so little that it was hard for me to juggle him around with the car seat. But the first meeting that we had there, Father Murphy again was so welcoming and so loving that we said, okay, this is where we would be coming. And then we realized that there was more children at Holy Faith. And so we ended up moving to Holy Faith. But we were so happy when he would come and visit at Holy Faith and see him there. Anything to say?
Well, Father Murphy, it's not every day that you meet a guy who is as kind and happy and as compassionate as he was. He was a great guy and he did a lot for us, and I'm sure he did a lot for many of us here. And we miss him. He's a great guy.
And you told me the thing that you remember most about him?
Mm-hmm. Every time I would see him, he would always be smiling. There was never a time where I didn't see him smiling. He was just always happy and always just great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Valentina. What a great way to remember him. Thank you. Pastor Ben.
Carol and Jeremiah and your family, Bev and I send our deepest love and prayers to all of you and our great sorrow for losing Richard. Apart from the fact that Richard's family came from County Leitrim and my family came from County Wexford, 2 different parts of Ireland, and quite apart from the fact that when Richard was at St. Bede's and I was at Christ Lutheran Church and Michael Rhyme was pastor of Lutheran Church of the Servant, we decided to celebrate the sort of forgotten feast of the calendar of the church, the Feast of the Ascension, and we rotated it between our 3 parishes, each doing a sermon when it came up to our time. Pastor Michael always asked questions about why we were doing it, and my sermon was devoted to the delight that we were doing it, but Richard's sermon actually explained the ascension to all of us who were present. What a great gift. When St. Bede's came under attack those many years ago, and we gathered, all of us in the community, literally surrounding St. Bede's with our bodies, inside and out, all the clergy and all the lay people of all the congregations. I think the last blessing that was spoken was came from the Wiccans, and the Wiccans were a community up either in Los Alamos or White Rock. And anyway, the service came to an end, and Richard and I were kind of locking up the church, as it were, and he came to me and he said, so Ben, what's the dental plan like in the Lutheran Church? And I said, why? He said, I'm not so sure the bishop's going to think highly
of me that I got a blessing from the Wiccans, but of course he never did. The deepest memory that I have, Bev and I have, is the day that our son died in Albuquerque. And when we came back to our house that evening, we walked inside the door and there was Richard. There was Richard waiting for us to embrace us and bring comfort to us. That's a gift I shall never forget. Love to all of you. We're very sad.
Thank you, Pastor Ben. Carrie Murphy.
Oh. Hi. I just want to share a symbol because a day or two after Dick died, I looked down and we have a couple of these around our home, but I never looked at it this way until I looked at it in the clover leaf. And I saw the hearts coming together. And that's what I thought of Dick. So maybe we could all hold that image when we see this and remember him by it.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, we certainly will remember his Irish roots and seeing a clover with the hearts. That will be a wonderful way to remember the great Irishman that he was and the great person he was. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything?
I would, Father. I would.
Go ahead.
Helen Blanton.
Helen, okay.
Oh, you all have said such beautiful things about that man. The good die young. He was young. It's too soon for him to go. Dick, John and I knew Dick since we arrived in Santa Fe, and I would say he's one of the best friends we've ever had in our life. We had a lot in common, our Eastern Coast roots, Irish history, and Dick's probation time in the probation department, which I feel was grounding for him. I mean, this was a man who knew who he was, knew his roots, never forgot what he did. He kept all of it together. And I think that's what I believe that truly made him those 20 years as a probation officer. And we shared that interest because I taught criminal justice at the community college. And he came to my classroom a couple of times to talk about his experiences. But the thing that I will always be so grateful for Dick was we also lost a son, as the Reverend just spoke about. And Dick came to our home. And most of all, at the memorial mass at St. Bede's following Paul's funeral in Austin, Dick gave the most beautiful homily that allowed me to break. We had heard wonderful things about Paul in Austin, Texas, wonderful homilies, but nothing was like what Dick said that day. He broke open my heart and I was able to begin to grieve for Paul. I am forever grateful. Jeremiah, he was so proud of you and your family. And he loved Carol so much. He said she was the best wife. So we will miss him tremendously. And we're so grateful for his life. God bless you all. And we pray for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I see it's either Patricia or John Cahalan's hand up, and then we'll go to Harvey, and then Rabbi Schwab.
Wait. Oh, we're muted. Okay, just a quickie, I'd forgotten to say this before, and I hope it brings you some comfort. Our parish here in Georgia, Prince of Peace, is praying for Richard at all the masses today and yesterday and throughout the rest of the week. And that's a lot of people. We have 10,000 people in our parish. So wow. a lot of prayers going up for Father Richard.
That's
End of
wonderful.
story. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Harvey, and then Rabbi Schwab.
Okay, I'm on, I take it.
You're good.
I'm a newcomer here to my relationship, or the relationship, from what I've been gathering, been watching now for a while. And the wonderful things said about this gentleman, I think can't do him justice. I developed a relationship with this guy just by listening to his sermons in the church, and I saw the effect that it was having on the parishioners, and not only on the parishioners, but it was having it on me. I had an opportunity I had several opportunities. We'd always have a little chat, just, hi, how you doing? But talk about sports and blah, blah, blah. But then one Sunday, the sermon particularly, I noticed the effect that it had on the congregation. And I remember I'd had when I came out here, back when I was in Dallas, I'd had a spiritual director. And the spiritual director back there ended up being a very good friend of mine, still is, lifelong. But we started spending more time out here, and I gave that relationship up, of course. But anyway, I told Janet, I said, if there is somebody out here that I would like to have in that position with my life, it would be Father Murphy. He was sorry about this. He was a wonderful guy. I never will forget the first way I asked him, I just went up to him after the service was over. And I said, "Do you do spiritual direction?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Would you consider me for spiritual as a spiritual director?" And he said, "Of course." And anyway, we started that relationship about 1.5 years ago, I guess it was. Well, it's longer than that because I'm losing time here because of the situations. But anyway, we met, and I don't think I've ever had such a warm feeling about this, being able to be honest about my relationship with God and my relationship with the church, as I had after that first meeting that we had. Long story short, he picked out, I'd always been kind of a Henry Nouwen guy on readings, and which is more a little softer than the way he went. He picked one for me to start with him on, and it was the 7-Story Mountain by Thomas Merton. And anyway, after going through that, and that was a very interesting experience, and it gave us a lot of opportunities to talk about people and their problems and how they deal with them in life, the spiritual journey that people take. It's a wonderful book. Well, long story short, and I won't go into any more detail on that one, but the next one he picked was one on Saint Benedict and the Benedictine movement, and it was written by a lady, and I cannot remember her name. I have the book, but I forgot to write the name down. Not important. The thing is that the one thing I remember talking to him about was, boy, Benedict was tough. He ran a tough ship. And I remember his comment back, and he says, yeah, but you got to remember the people he was dealing with at that time, and the requirements that he had to have in order to get people's attention. Well, he and I enjoyed having lunches. I enjoyed having I've been listening to all the relationships with all of you people. You were very blessed to have him as a friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. Before Rabbi Schwab speaks, I just want people to know that Father Richard's sister Anne wrote in the chat, I'd like to thank everyone for sharing your wonderful memories. I'm still not able to speak yet, but I want to say that he was the best brother everyone could have. Thank you all. Thank you, Anne. Rabbi.
Well, a rabbi, a priest, and a minister walked into the restaurant for breakfast, which we did many, many times. And it was a highlight of the week. We were able to share with each other the frustrations of being clergy. We were able to encourage each other and give each other strength and share our knowledge. And fond memories, Dick's stories, his smile, his laughter, things I'll miss a lot. His intellect, because we studied together. I was able to do an interfaith clergy retreat in the Bahamas with our spouses. And so my wife got to meet Dick as well. And Janet feels the loss as I do. And there is a story. We used to have a Super Bowl party. And one year there was an infamous wardrobe failure. And we didn't know what had happened because we were so deep in conversation. We missed the whole halftime show and had to go back to understand what people were buzzing about. But there was one year where we made a stew of sorts, a turkey stew, turkey chili, and we forgot. And we added beer as the recipe called for, and then got incredibly worried because Dick and I would talk about the courage that he had and what it took to stay the straight and narrow, if you will. And I would ask him after 35 years of sobriety, did it get any easier? He was quite honest with me, and he said, no, it doesn't. He said, I can't promise you tomorrow. I can only promise you today. And I think in reality, that's true for all of us. The only thing we can promise is today. No one knows what tomorrow will bring. But Dick was a guiding light on that path for courage and resoluteness. And his ability to do the reconciliation work that he did. There were stories about being surrounded by people with guns and people who didn't appreciate, even in Ireland, what he was trying to do. But he managed anyway. And so he's a role model for all of us. And to think that a Lutheran pastor and a rabbi speak so kindly and so deeply and so lovingly of Dick, and that we and our spouses were affected by him as well, says an awful lot. And I know that if Larry Haslam, who's a Baptist minister, could be here, he would be speaking too, because he and Dick would have breakfast once a week. They were the last two of us that were able to do that, continuing in Santa Fe. And that Dick could affect people so deeply is a testament to the purity of his soul and his kindness. And I remember talking to him as a rabbi and as a Jew to a Christian pastor and saying, where do I fit in? And he said, at the end, I believe we'll all be sitting around the same campfire. And that idea that different paths to the same God could lead to a peaceful end, or we might indeed, in spirit, be together again and in fellowship is deeply comforting to me and deeply moving. And Carol, Janet, and I send you our deepest condolences. This is a loss that came as a shock to the soul and a shock to the heart, and something that my mind is still trying to encompass. But Dick was a dear friend, a great colleague, and an inspiration when it came to spirituality as well. And we're thankful for that. And at Temple Beth Shalom, his name is mentioned at the Mourner's Kaddish at each service. And the appellation that goes with his name as a dear friend to all, which is exactly what he was. We miss him, and we say in the Jewish world, Zichrono livracha, may his memory always be a blessing. In Dick's case, there's no doubt it will be. And I want to thank you for the opportunity again, Carol and Jeremiah and the rest of the family. We offer our deepest condolences. Know that we hold you tenderly in our hearts and in our prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Schwab. Penny, I see your hand.
Message from Glorietta.
Okay. Hold on, Alice. We'll go to you right after Penny.
Carol, Jeremiah, Carrie, Walden, our love goes out to you. I've never met Jeremiah or Carrie or Walden, but I feel like I know you. Father Richard was my spiritual director for the past 3 years and such an important part of my life. Cannot say enough about him and his support and his love through this time of my discernment and my formation. You know, I thought he'd be here when it was time to be ordained, and he will. It'll just be in a different way. He's going to be sorely missed. I've always said he was my biggest cheerleader. I could not tell you how supportive and encouraging and loving and challenging all at the same time that he was, and just a wonderful, wonderful man. We have a huge loss here on earth, but God has that other angel right up there, and I'm sorry for your loss. You are in our prayers. We send our love, and we know that we will all be together again. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Alice, you want to unmute yourself and come in from Glorietta?
I think I'm here now.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. There's so much to treasure and to miss about Father Richard all through COVID, all through this last year and until the last week of his life. We would chat every other week, every week. Sometimes he would check on myself and my family. It's just hard to know he's not available to talk to. I miss serving with him, especially on the weekday masses. I miss his sermons. I miss his friendship. You could talk to him about anything. He was a spiritual advisor to me. He was my connection to Ireland, which may sound strange to some people, but it meant so much to me. And if the cats wouldn't come to the blessing of the animals, he'd bless them over the phone or chase them around my house to catch them, to bless them. He was such a friend. And Carol, the dinners that you and Father Richard shared with us and with our friends, there's so many people that met the two of you that just loved you. And while I'll miss that, I hope you will continue our friendship and be able to share again with us. So God bless you and your family, and I love you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. I think we're going to have to bring this to a conclusion because our Zoom time runs out at 1:30. So from what we've heard this morning and afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in, it's truly, as Rabbi Schwab said, Father Richard was a blessing. He was a blessing to everyone who met him. He was a blessing to the parishes he served in Quincy and in at St. Bede's here in Santa Fe, and then at Holy Faith. St. Bede's loss as when he retired as rector was certainly Holy Faith's gain. And I know when I arrived here, Father Richard had been helping out more frequently after Father Ken's untimely and tragic death. And when I saw the kind of warmth and the face of Jesus that he brought to the parish and to the healing process after Father Ken's death, it was just a wonderful salve on the cause of healing. And so it was a no-brainer to make him an assisting priest at Holy Faith. And in the time that I worked with him, he was just a wonderful source of support and of wisdom and of grace and of love of Jesus that he shared with everybody. So I know that we're all the richer for having known him, and he will continue to influence our lives as we go forth. We will carry him in our hearts, and we will carry you, Carol, and Jeremiah and your family also in our hearts and in our prayers in the days and weeks ahead. I thought I would give the close with the blessing that comes at the conclusion of the burial office. So let us pray. May the God of peace, who brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus Christ, the great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, make you perfect in every good work to do his will, working in you that which is well-pleasing in his sight. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit rest upon you this day and remain with you always. Amen. Thank you all very much for your participation and for your wonderful remembrances. It's been a joy to be with you and a blessing to be with you. And of course, it was Father Richard that brought us all together for this time. So we owe him a lot of thanks. God bless you all.